Hello and welcome. I am so glad you are here today. The word divorce conjures up images of fierce court battles. Yet, in the United States, nearly 95% of divorces are settled out of court. Some people think that I'm going to go to court and I'm going to show the world what a bad person he or she is, but that is not necessarily the case. There is a process that will not only save dollars, but has a better chance of preserving family relationships. Listen in as Brenda Bridges, a certified divorce financial analyst, mediator, certified divorce coach, and founder of Bridging Divorce Solutions, shares how to navigate one of life's most precious transactions with clarity, confidence, and calm. This is the Silver Divorce Podcast, broadcast from the Whitfield Media Group studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Please follow this show and share it with people you know who are facing divorce. We are proudly brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. And I'm your host, Lisa McCluskey, and now let's podcast. Welcome, Brenda.
It is so good to be here with you today. I thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm glad you're here as well. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I had wished I had known all of this much sooner.
I hear that frequently.
I'm sure.
Had I known you when.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Well, I was recently asked to share the lessons learned from my own divorce. And one of the top takeaways I shared was the importance of approaching divorce with a settlement mindset. When I found out that my husband was filing for divorce, I found out through a family member because he didn't tell me. And when I finally approached him to ask him, I was blindsided and I was angry. And he said, "Are you going to fight me on this?" And I said, "I'm not going to make it easy." Well, in hindsight, I wish that I had approached it from a settlement mindset, because with the vast majority of divorces settling before trial, it's very important. It's actually critical to understand when to fight and when to find common ground. And especially not only to protect your finances, but to protect your emotional well-being. And I'll add to that, about midway through the process, I did approach my husband with a written settlement offer, and had realized that continuing to fight just cost both of us more money. Mm-hmm. But we ended up doing in mediation. But one of the other aspects of a prolonged divorce fight is it reshapes the entire family dynamic as everybody gets involved. Everybody takes sides and has opinions, and it really destroys families, as I'm sure
agree.
You've seen.
And the drama and trauma of the process can take over the decision making.
Oh, absolutely.
And there are those out there who will cite that, it's just become a business decision. I personally don't agree, especially after a long-term marriage. There's so much emotion entangled in the decisions that you have to make that needs to be tended as well. And the court system isn't built for that.
Right. And I can tell you, I remember at one point I was so angry, and that I said, "I don't care if the attorneys get all of our money. I'm going to continue to fight you." And, eventually I did soften and realize that we needed to go about this in a better way. But there, like you said, there's so much emotion when you've been with somebody. We were together 34 years. It's just an emotional time. So I'm ready to dive in, and let's talk about collaborative divorce and how we can make this easier for people.
It is something that's growing. Collaborative process has been around since the 1990s, but it has strongholds. Mm-hmm. There are pockets where it's commonly practiced, And there are many places where we still need to grow the process. And in a nutshell, I would say collaborative is that space between litigation where attorneys are driving the process, the court system, the calendar, etc., and mediation where you have a neutral party who's guiding you through the decisions, and that can happen in all sorts of ways as well. Collaborative attorneys are involved, but it remains out of court. So you're making your decisions with someone who's an advocate, who has your back, but you're making it in your own space and way. And you referred a couple of times to the process that you went through where you're angry and hurt. And of course you were, right? Usually one person is far ahead and you talk to people about divorce all the time.
Right.
So this is common knowledge, but not when it's happening to you.
Right. One person typically has mentally left the marriage at least a year before they file. And for women, there's a study that says they, on average, wait 2 years.
Yes.
So they've left the marriage 2 years prior to actually saying, I want a divorce. So they've processed all of those emotions.
A lot of those emotions. And as they're in the process, then they want it to move. They want to go forward.
Right.
They want to make the decision and get on with life. And it's helpful to remember that their partner is at the very beginning. They might then be in rage or grief or whatever emotional stages they need to go through to be in a place where they can make good decisions. And one thing I believe collaborative process allows is that space. You know, you have professionals who are in the room real time helping guide people. They've seen other people go through the process, and your professional team is able to go, it feels like this party needs some more time. Like they're still bringing a lot of anger to the process, or they're maybe not fully participating. They're making decisions that don't seem aligned with the goals they've stated. They might just need some time. In the court process and litigation process, you're on the court schedule. It's happening when the court says it's going to happen, when the attorneys can fit you in. Oftentimes that's slower than people would like, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's rushed and more hurried. I had someone actually come to me last week with something that she had agreed to in the litigation process that she didn't fully understand, and it all happened so fast. And she's like, my attorney just did it, and I don't know what's going on. In collaborative process, you've got space to ask those questions, to understand, to kind of know what you're deciding and get backup or background on those decisions, the ramifications of them, not just a quick yes or no or a cursory agreement.
So let me just step back so we can clearly understand in a collaborative process, who is the team?
So the team, the core team in collaborative process is going to be 2 attorneys who are collaboratively trained. That's really important, and we can circle back to that. And then at least 1 financial neutral and a divorce coach. So when you think about divorce and the decisions that you're making, most of them are family or financial. They are not legal, but it's cast within this legal backdrop, and you're dissolving a legal contract. But you're deciding about dollars, thus a financial advisor. So you have a financial person who is trained in divorce finances, because divorce finances are really different than retirement planning, college planning. It's specific to the laws of your state, perhaps your county. It can be that distinct. Where I just came back, the Divorce Financial Analyst annual conference was last week in Denver. So I just came back from that, and it just underscored for me again how different things are in different states. So if I'm talking to an advisor, a CDFA who works in California or Florida or Illinois or Tennessee, we're all dealing with separate rules. And a divorce financial analyst is versed in the rules for the locality that they're practicing in. So they're helping people in a neutral way, meaning instead of, if we keep contrasting to litigation, in litigation, you're not sharing information necessarily voluntarily, even though it's your marital information. In the discovery process, it's formal between the parties under the court system, and you're asking the other party for all of this documentation, which actually you've shared over 34, 26, however many years, that takes a lot of time and money.
Yes.
In the collaborative process, everyone is agreeing to transparency, to coming to the table and saying, this is all of our information. I'm not hiding anything. I'm sharing it all. They save a lot of time and money skipping the formal discovery process and doing that, where then the CDFA, the financial person who is neutral, is going to take that information. I use a program called Family Law Software. There are others, but that's kind of industry standard. And it's specific financial planning software for divorce. So we can look at what are the ramifications of a settlement. We can take into account what tax impact there's going to be. We can, as people are talking through scenarios, we're all in the same room and can say, well, let's look at what would happen if you do that. Or, I just want you to be aware, if you do what you've planned to do, you could have big tax ramifications 5-6 years down the road, and so on. So that's your financial person. They're helping you figure out how to divide assets. They're helping you in states that do not have alimony, spousal support, maintenance, all the same thing, called different things. They're helping you figure out maybe how to get to what that number is. Some states have formulas, a lot don't. And then divide assets or liabilities if there's debt. And looking at practicality of decisions. If someone wants to keep the house, can they keep the house? Are they able to pay for the house? I know you recently did a podcast on ramifications of what happens to the house. It's often the biggest asset. So walking through all those things. You have a divorce coach who in some states is a mental health professional, in others doesn't have to be, so dependent on your state. The coach is managing the process. So they are communicating, setting the meetings. They might be kind of referred to it a little earlier, they might be noticing how the parties are reacting. If one party needs more time, they might be bringing that awareness to the team to say, I see party A is not speaking up. They're looking agitated. How do we handle this as a team? How do we coach them? How do we support them? So they're bringing, to the best of their ability, their best self to the process to make these really important decisions. And then you have two attorneys. And the attorneys are advocates much like they are in litigation. The big difference is in litigation, and this is how I would paraphrase it, in litigation, their job is to get as much as they possibly can for their client.
Yeah, I was thinking that as you've been talking, that's the big striking difference is that in normal litigation, their job is to get as much as they possibly can for their client. And whether or not it's the fair or right thing for the couple.
And from the get-go, it's adversarial.
Very much so.
It's win-lose.
And you spoke about discovery, and I submitted over 300 documents for discovery. So it is very adversarial.
And it's time-consuming and expensive.
Very.
I worked with a client earlier this year in the litigation process because I do support that as well. Just not as much. And she paid me thousands of dollars to help her prepare her discovery. And it's mind-boggling because it's marital information.
Right.
They're both asking each other for the same information and then exchanging it and paying professionals like me and attorneys to review that information. But it should, there are cases where it's necessary, where money is being hidden or there's dissipation. So spending money outside of the marriage that's unauthorized. So there are definitely cases where that's necessary, but in my experience, the vast majority don't need it.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me as though that, going back to the divorce financial analyst, they are looking at it from a holistic standpoint of what's going to be the best decision for both parties.
In the collaborative
process.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I would agree. And remember, they're a neutral in that process. So it's not an advice-giving position. It's not like, hey, this is a good deal. This is the best thing.
Laying out the facts.
It is. It's educating and giving information, perhaps pointing out pitfalls so people are aware. But they're making the decisions, and the advice givers or the advocates are the attorneys in that scenario. It's different if you're working with someone in litigation. If I'm supporting someone through the court process, I am just like the attorneys trying to get the best possible deal for them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in this process for couples who are divorcing later in life, how do you see it as more beneficial than the traditional court process?
I think you mentioned kind of at the beginning of our chat here that people can come to the court process and think that they're going to be heard. Their story will be told. They will get up there and be able to tell the world what they've experienced, good, bad, or indifferent. That doesn't ever happen.
Right.
In the litigation process. You might have an hour, you might have a day, but how can you encapsulate everything that has happened in the marriage and why you're thinking what you're thinking, feeling what you're feeling, bringing this to the court system? They don't care. They're too busy. They're there to make decisions under the law if you are in that 5% that ultimately gets to court.
Right.
So you can have your day in court, but you can't really have your story shared. In the collaborative process, you can.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the goals of what you want in your future. You talk about why you're making the decisions that you're making. What are you carrying? What are you bringing to this? And it might be entirely different than what would happen in a litigation process, but it's meaningful to you. And if you're going through gray divorce, you're most likely to have a long-term marriage, a very intertwined lives. There's a lot of story there. So there can be a lot of reasons that you're bringing to make the decisions that you're making. And there's space for that and that discussion and collaborative that I really don't believe you get in other process. And there's space to look at how the decisions you're making will impact you both, because you're moving on with distinct and separate lives in the future. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't see that happening in litigation for the most part.
Right. And I can share as you know, in Tennessee, for contested cases, mediation is mandatory. Well, even when you get to mediation, you have two attorneys and you have the mediator.
Not always, but yes.
And I can just share in my case, and it's very much focused on the finances. You know, nobody there cares about the story. Nobody there cares about what happened. It is strictly, you know, here is the listing of assets and how are we going to divide those? Yes,
and it can be problematic in that often. So I'm going to caveat, there are different styles of mediation. That is one. That's an evaluative business style mediation, usually practiced like shuttle mediation, where the parties aren't talking face to face. They're in separate rooms and you've got an attorney going back and forth. Very business oriented. But as you said, we're not talking about cause in that scenario. They're just, here's your bucket of stuff. How do we divide it? But they're also not looking at how is this going to impact you in the future? How does this match your goals? We might divide things in someone who needs a lot of liquidity because perhaps they haven't worked outside of the home. Very important in gray divorce. You don't have a runway to recover. If you're getting divorced when you're 60 and you haven't worked in 30 years, you are probably not going to go out there and get a job making a couple $100,000.
No, very challenging.
So, yeah. And in that style of mediation, is it being taken into account that you got, let's say you're not 60, let's say you're 57. So if you take money out of an IRA, you're going to pay a penalty and you're going to pay taxes. Very often, I don't see any of that taken into account in a typical shuttle business style mediation. It's just divide the bucket.
Right. And also I will say that even the decision about to keep the house in mediation, there isn't a discussion about the tax implications of that or the future capital gains implications of that. It's almost an expectation that you'll have figured that out yourself before you get there.
Right. And I would add, I do practice mediation. It's the majority of what I do. I'm hoping collaborative catches on in Tennessee and becomes more and more common because I do believe it's the best way to go about it. But I practice a mediation that's informed mediation.
Right. That's the difference. So, informed mediation.
Exactly. We're bringing that same financial information to the parties. They're still making their own decisions, but sharing with them, here are the ramifications of capital gains down the road, or the cost of sale of the house, or what's going to happen in your tax bracket if you fill in the blank. Or, very importantly, and this is so often overlooked, can you do what you said you're going to do? I've had people come to me and say, will you look this over? This is our agreement. And they can't do it. Like, it is absolutely not, there's no ability to execute it. So they have to go back to the drawing board. But if they have that drawn up and filed, that is their agreement.
So, and they have to stick with it.
And they have to stick with it, which could mean that one party loses literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And I want to go back. You talked about the tax implications. One thing that is very important in gray divorce, because oftentimes they're already on Social Security, that they don't think about, if they take a distribution from a 401k that counts as income, that'll increase their tax bracket and the threshold for Social Security. They could the next year then end up paying more for Part B, and Social Security penalizes you
for earned income.
Right, for earned income over a certain threshold. And there are cases where the person didn't realize that, and suddenly they're getting maybe $500 less a month in their Social Security check because they made the decision to take a large withdrawal from a Social Security, or I'm sorry, from an IRA to perhaps buy that house or whatever it is that they needed.
Right. And there are ways, and again, back to informed.
Right.
As long as people are knowingly making those decisions, they're making their own decisions. They're empowered. They have the information to do so. But oftentimes people aren't. They don't have that information. And that's a really big, bad surprise to get down the road.
Absolutely. So you definitely would want to have an informed mediation so that you are getting that knowledge as you're trying to make those decisions, and somebody who's looking at it from a non-emotional standpoint.
And I know it can be really difficult, but what I recommend to people is to start with your purpose and your goals, and then figure out your process. Some people absolutely need to litigate. Most people don't. Do you need a collaborative process where you want it to be private and out of court, and you want to own your own decisions and your schedule, and you are going to most likely pay a lot less than you would litigation, but you need someone in there to guide you? Collaborative could be very good. If you don't have a really complicated financial situation, or you're still able to make decisions together with guidance, then mediation might be the route for you. But you figure that out, then you hire your professionals to match it. Because if you start out immediately hiring someone who loves to litigate, you are probably going to litigate whether it was necessary or not.
Yeah, oftentimes you'll read, somebody will say, I need a bulldog attorney. I'm getting a divorce.
That
and I
hurts
say,
my heart
I know, me too.
so much.
I want to say, no, you don't.
No, you mostly don't. And even if you're hurt, angry, rageful, all the things at the beginning, that does settle.
It does.
Often.
Yeah.
Given time and space.
It's the whole grief process. You're raging and angry at the beginning, and then you begin to work through those emotions where you can think a little more clearly.
And then you can start to move forward, and that's the important part.
Right.
Because the divorce is going to happen. Like, even if a divorce is contested, even if it lasts, I've seen cases, 5-7 years. They drag on, but ultimately, at least in our current legal system, it's going to happen. So I guess the sooner that the parties are able to realize that and start to move towards that independent life, the better for everyone.
I would agree with that. I would agree. You can't move on if you're still in a series of legal filings. It's hard to move on with your life. And
if you're entrenched in that drama, and people do, whether it's purposeful or not, society tends to oh my gosh, that's happening to you. How could that happen? I never thought it would happen. And really people like to know, What's the skinny? What's going on? What happened?
The drama.
The drama. And if you stay in that, if you're surrounded by that, if that's encouraged, then you're way less likely to have a positive outcome.
Yeah, and people also start weighing in on, well, you should fight for this and you should fight for that.
And they have not lived your life.
They have not, and they're not understanding the damage to the entire family dynamic, because suddenly, in many cases, the family's divided over who should fight for what and who's getting what. So it's not good.
Yeah, and in the end, it's kind of stuff.
It is. It's kind of stuff.
It can be meaningful, but I think more purposeful is, are you both going to be okay? Are you going to be able to live? Are you going to be able to pay your bills? Are your children? Everyone starts, the first thing they say if they have minor children is, I want the children to be okay. I want them to come through, as whole as possible. I want us to continue to co-parent. And then if you're thrown in the court system a few months in, it's not about that anymore. And it's horrible to see.
It's about who has control, and which is sad. So if I'm starting that process, and how do I go about finding somebody that is a coach or a mediator? What are the steps that I should take? Many of our listeners are from all over the country and also in other countries as well.
So first, your process, because you want someone who supports you in the process you feel best matches your scenario, your situation. And then look for the people, the professionals who can best support that. Different professionals are licensed in different ways. So as a mediator, as a financial person, a CDFA, and as a divorce coach, I can work in any state. Attorneys have to be licensed in the area where they're practicing. So, here we have a lot of attorneys who are licensed in Tennessee and Georgia. They can practice in both states. Some are only Tennessee. If you live in Georgia, you can't hire that person and have them represent you. So first is, they have to be, whoever the professional you need is, they have to be licensed in your area and able to practice there. And then you can look at certifying organizations. So if you are wanting to pursue a collaborative divorce, the IACP, which is the International Association of Collaborative Professionals, is a really good resource, because anyone who belongs to that, whether they're a coach, a financial, or an attorney, has gone through that training. So they're well-versed in how do you go about a collaborative divorce. They're trained in mediation. They're going to be more goal-oriented. Now, they might also practice litigation, but that they're credentialed in collaborative process. There are different mediator associations. So you can look those up and see who is listed and credentialed as a mediator. Same thing, there are now 2 different organizations that credential divorce coaches. So you can go to them as a resource. But ideally, you're looking for someone who has training in the modality and the process that you want, and seeing that they're certified there, and then looking for who's in your area. Or like right now, I have clients in Florida, Texas, Oregon, New York, Vermont. So in some cases, it doesn't matter where you are. I've helped people in Singapore.
Okay.
So it depends on the process, and then go to the certifying organizations and look people up and call them. Look at what they've written. Does it jive with what you think you need? If someone was the best attorney for your cousin or your aunt or your neighbor, they may not be for you. If you need someone who really wants to talk things through and explain, then look for that in your professional. If you have someone who is very cursory, busy, doesn't, answers yes, no. They might answer you but not give a lot of information, and that's not what you need, don't hire that person. Right. There is someone for everyone. Like, I'm not for everyone, but there's someone for you. And I like to think that ultimately people get a good match. I sadly pretty often get people who come to me and say, I hired this attorney and they won't return my calls and I'm so frustrated and I don't know what's going on. you are walking through the biggest decision, likely, certainly the biggest financial decision that you're ever going to make.
That's very true.
You need someone who will answer your questions, will be there in the way you need them to be there, not the way they want to run a case.
And I want to underscore that because in great divorce, as you alluded to earlier, you don't have the opportunity to make up what you are dividing. So it is what you are going to have to live on for many years, and you have to make sure that you're getting what is fair, what is equitable, and what you can both live on. So,
And that there's a good understanding of the rules or laws that are going to shape that.
right.
It's really different state to state. In Illinois, for spousal support, maintenance there's a formula. You plug in incomes, you plug in how long you were married, it spits out, here's your alimony and here's how long. You can deviate, especially if people are really high net worth, but it's pretty structured. As you know, Tennessee does not have that.
Right.
So it's much more nuanced, and you need to understand that. And there will be people who have kind of the soap opera version of what divorce means in their head, and maybe they were married for 2 years and they expect alimony for 10. Highly unlikely. Flip side, someone might have been married for 35 years, still working, and says, I'm not going to pay alimony to their spouse who is a stay-at-home parent. Well, they probably are. So there needs to be a dose of realism in how things are going to be divided. Another thing that I frequently hear is someone will say, well, that's my retirement. That's got my name on it. It's mine, all mine. And if you earned it and saved it during the marriage, it's marital. It doesn't matter whose name is on it. Or people will say, we kept our accounts separate. Well, unless you have a pre or post-nuptial agreement already separating those accounts, that's marital.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not just because it has my name on it. It's my stuff or my account or my money or my house or, mine. If you earned it during the marriage, it is most likely marital. And there are always exceptions, and there can always be discussions. But as a very general starting place for the funds, for money, unless it's an inheritance or a gift, if it was earned or saved during the marriage, it belongs to both of you, regardless of whose name is on it.
Right.
Got an injury that just can't wait? There's no need to delay your care. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is excited to announce that our Urgent Ortho Walk-In Clinic is now available on Saturdays at the Gun Barrel Road location. Open from 8 to noon, we're here to treat sprains, strains, fractures, and more. No appointment needed. So skip the long ER wait and get specialized orthopedic care fast. Visit us this Saturday at Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics Urgent Ortho. We're the center for expert care right when you need it. Learn more at sportmed.com.
And in states where the distribution is equitable, is that where going to a collaborative or a mediated a divorce is more beneficial because you're not looking for a judge to make that decision, but you as a couple are making that decision.
I would say that's a fair statement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you never know, and you don't know what backstory or future plans people are necessarily bringing to those decisions. So an example, clarifying equitable states are not the 50-50 states.
Right.
Equitable most often ends up 50-50 in my experience. But if there's cause for a person to get more of the settlement, maybe they don't have the earning power of the other or what have you, then there's discretion there. If you do it in mediation or collaborative, you can decide together what makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
And we can project forward. How are you going to be in 5, 10, 15 years? I had a case last year where one was a very high income earner. The other party had always worked, but a fraction of the income. And the high income earner was really balking at paying any kind of alimony. And they had a long-term marriage. But once we could sort it out and show them that they would be fine in retirement to the tune of many, many millions, but the other party would literally have to work until they were well into their 70s and still run out of money, it became much more palatable to give a greater share of the assets and pay alimony, because they could both see they're going to both be okay then.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, even through the anger, most people, at least that I deal with, they don't want their spouse destroyed.
Right, especially after decades and decades of marriage.
Yeah.
There's still an underlying, I think, an underlying caring for that other person once you're through the anger. Right.
Yeah, and they might never want to speak again, but
Right.
that doesn't mean they want them living on the street.
Right, exactly. So let me just, you spoke about how to find that person. When you do find somebody you want to work with, you think you want to work with, you're going in for your first meeting, what should you have ready for that first meeting?
That's a really good question. If anyone wants to reach out, I actually have a question. It's like a pamphlet. It's actually quite extensive of questions to ask, depending on the professional. But what they should have prepared, I think the information is less important than the feeling. If you go into that meeting and it's just an introductory meeting, you're learning about them, they're learning about you. Is the professional on time? Do you feel comfortable in the space? Are you greeted? Do they seem like they have something more important to do? Or are they focusing on you? Do they answer the questions that you ask? Because how it starts, that's most likely how it will carry on. And again, lots and lots of stories. We all have our stories, but people will come and I had one client who I was coaching. She was going through litigation and they met in my office because she just couldn't be in her attorney's office because it was in such disarray that she couldn't focus and make good decisions. If you find yourself in a space like that with your professional, they're not answering your question. And again, maybe they were a great attorney for someone else or a great CDFA or a great coach. But if you don't feel comfortable and you don't feel like you're being attended to, they're probably not a great person for you. So, yes, you can get all your financial information together. You can have your backstory. You can have all that information, but I really don't think it's as pertinent for the first meeting as, is this person a good match for me? Do I feel supported? Do I feel like my questions are answered? Do I understand what's going on? Or are they like, hey, you just don't worry your pretty little head, sit over there and I will run this show.
Okay.
Because it's your life. You should be...
You want to have a voice.
Yeah, you want to have a voice and be empowered to make decisions and not continually be surprised at what just happened because it wasn't explained to you.
Mm-hmm. So is it possible if I started down the path of a litigation, if you will, and like I did, midway went, gee, this is crazy. Is it possible to switch to involving a collaborative or a mediated process? Or is that a little more challenging?
I think it's more challenging. What I counsel people when I have a first call is you can always become more aggressive if need be. Always. You're not in mediation jail. Like, you don't have to stay there.
Right.
You can always get more aggressive if need be. It's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle.
To go the other way.
If you start out in an aggressive mode and then you want to walk it back.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying it can't be done. In my experience, that doesn't really happen because once you're in this adversarial, you've been served. I mean, you found out from someone else that you were getting a divorce.
Yes.
That's really unpalatable. Like, that's really hard to go from that to, let's sit down at a table and discuss all of our decisions. So yeah, I'm not saying it's not doable, but I think it's easier to start out in the least aggressive, least expensive, least time-consuming manner that fits your situation. Cannot stress that enough. And then if you need to become more aggressive, then you can move to the next or move to the next. Most don't go to court anyway, as you've noted.
Right.
But they're still in that backdrop of the court system if you are in litigation with attorneys who are adversarial, and that's their job. Doesn't mean they're bad people. they're doing their job. But the setup in doing their job has a lot of fallout for families, for finances. It's not uncommon for people to spend $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 on a divorce. I ask you, why? Is it necessary? Maybe, but probably not.
What did you gain in the end? Was it worth it in the end?
Yeah, and if choosing that means that you're not going to even be able to be in the same room down the road, that at a child's wedding, the kids are going to be upset and worried about, the parents seeing each other or where they're going to sit them or things being equal. There are a lot of things that happen post-divorce. And that's another thing. I don't know. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I frequently see people or hear people who think the day they're divorced, it's done. And I really think the day you're divorced is the beginning of whatever comes next. It's not finished. You've spent 20, 30 years together. That doesn't just erase. And if you have children, you have shared family, you live in the same town, there's likely to be overlap moving forward. It's, not always, but there could be a lot of contact that you need to kind of be aware of how that's going to be managed, especially as impact the kids, even if they're adult kids.
Right. And with great divorce, there's often grandchildren. So you want to be able to at least be present at the same time at children's ball games. And it's a process to work through it to that. And I will say, for me, I had to get to a point of forgiveness about the way things happened and own my role in how the marriage ended before I could be okay with that. At first, you're so angry and seething, you don't want to see that person ever again. But it is a real process to work through the forgiveness, owning your role, and realizing that, the family still has to be together. It's still a family unit.
I agree, and I actually come at it from a different perspective where, for both of us, the divorce wasn't handled well. It had a horrible impact on the children. A lot of why I do what I do is because I don't want other families to experience what we all experienced. Not just me, not just my ex, the whole family. And the fallout is really detrimental. And if I could walk it back and do it differently, I certainly would. But I can't, so I can only move forward and do it differently and help other people in that same vein.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. And throughout doing this podcast, most of my guests have devoted their lives to a career of helping people through divorce because of what they went through. And it's the reason that I do this podcast, is I hope to help people through and not experience what I did. So
yeah, and all evidence is that you are certainly helping people, and it's giving good information. Like you talked about the seeing the social media posts. I need a bulldog attorney. Do not get your information from social media because it's not vetted. You don't know what those people have any credentials, but they're telling you what to do with your life. No.
Exactly.
Get good vetted professional opinions, not random anonymous posts. You deserve better.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. So it is, if anything, I would say enter it with a collaborative mindset. Enter into it with we can get through this in a mediation or collaborative way. The least amount of damage that you can do to both parties and to the family, the best, because most people step back and 2 years later they look back and they'll say, I wish we hadn't have done it that way.
I agree. And I think there's a sort of a misunderstanding as to what collaborative means, or you'll also hear amicable divorce. That doesn't mean you have to be best friends.
Right.
You don't have to. It just means you're making the decision to work with professionals trained in a different modality. You're not turning over your decisions to the court system. You are being empowered and informed in how to make them. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to even like each other. It's just a commitment to making your own decisions out of court. And the collaborative or amicable is more referring to the professionals. They're working, like we refer to team, they're working towards your goals and supporting you in that, as opposed to win-lose.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that do you really want somebody sitting up on a bench making decisions about your life for you? Or
Right.
you want to do it together?
And you don't know what that person in the robe, like, did they have a fight with their spouse?
Exactly.
Do you remind them of someone, their ex-girlfriend from high school that tromped on their heart? Do they have a picnic to go to? Like, you don't know what's going on in their world that can absolutely shape their decisions.
That's right. Keep the trust in your own hands with the help of professionals who've been trained. So, well, I like this. I encourage this. I'm a big advocate for it. So thank you for joining me. I'm going to ask you a few personal questions. And I know you've been at this a while. In all of your time of working with people, is there a couple or person whose story particularly moved you?
Well, so many. I think all of them do. And I know that's a very general answer. I think that the people who, I can think of one in particular who, when she first came to me, had been in the process a few months, was not being supported, was not understanding what was going on, what her rights were, what their finances were. Like, she was in total disarray and really, I just can think of the word, like, disheveled and defeated. And her divorce took a couple of years, so it took some time. But by the time she ended the process, she was just so ready to step into her life. She was very empowered. She knew what she wanted. She's building her own business. It was just such and is and continues to be a transformative story. So divorce can be devastating, but it can also lead to huge growth.
Yes.
Seeing that was beautiful.
That's fantastic. That's one of the reasons I named this Silver Divorce, is that not only is it for the silver gray population, but there can be a silver lining after going through divorce.
Yeah, no good marriage ultimately ends in divorce. There's some reason.
There is.
And you've mentioned it over and over again in other podcasts that you've done. We both have roles.
Yes.
Both parties. It's not one party's fault. Even if there are bad acts, both people play a role in a relationship. It takes two.
That's right. Okay, so what books are on your bedside table?
Let Them Theory by Mel.
Oh, yes.
I picked that up and read through it. Tribe is on my bedside table right now. I just finished a training in a wonderful co-parenting program out of Kansas called BEH2O. And I ordered all the books she recommended. So I can't quote the title, but they're stacked up for me to work through them.
That's fantastic. So do you work with a lot of people who have minor children?
I do.
Do you? Okay.
I do. More and more gray divorce. But I do work with quite a few where we're working through their parenting plans. And they do have minor children, sometimes even infants.
I can see how beneficial that would be, as you really have a long horizon of co-parenting.
Yes, and this is not dissing the state, but the state's parenting plan is very cursory. It's what's the schedule, what's the child support, who carries health care, pretty much we're done. And when we work on a parenting plan, we work through a lot more of the qualitative aspects of co-parenting. How are you going to handle new significant others? How are you going to handle discipline between households? How are you going to handle driver's ed? It's more of how are you going to handle life in two households with these kids that you both love?
The realistic aspects of it.
And the things that can blow up. And again, that's just bad for the children, ultimately bad for the children. So we work through a lot of that, and people really then can craft their, and this is a little off topic, I think, for great divorce, but people can craft how they want to raise their children. And it doesn't mean they have to agree. They just have to be informed. Mm-hmm. So if they choose to discipline children differently, that's fine, as long as there's clarity for the kids that this is how we're going to do it.
Right.
So a lot of that work goes into
Sounds like
good parenting plan.
A much healthier process for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Just clarity. The more clarity we can bring to this, I think the better.
Absolutely. So you've inspired so many people to get through a difficult process. Who is inspiring you?
I just referred to the BEH2O. That's Trina Knudsen, who developed that. Right now, she is a huge inspiration. I would say because, again, parents are kind of fed this, like, you need to get along, you need to be amicable. Well, if you're getting divorced, there's a reason.
Right.
And this program gives parents the tools to co-parent effectively, even when they don't communicate well, they don't like each other. They might have a lot of strife, but it really teaches them how to truly put the kids first. And that's not a skill, that's taught. Mm-hmm. And during the marriage, it was probably not practiced. So it's a whole new skill set. And then another one is, her name is Jacinta Gallant, and she is a mediator out of Canada, very active in the collaborative world. Canada's really strong in collaborative divorce. And she is teaching, it's called Insight Mediation. And her program is the Curious Mediator. And she's really fabulous. And it's just it's a wonderful and broad way to look at how to empower people to make their own decisions and support them in that. And there's a methodology behind it that is just so respectful and insightful, versus the Rule 31 mediation that we have in Tennessee, which is so transactional. Mm-hmm. So those two are really inspirational to me right now.
That's great. Do you think as a whole we're moving more toward collaborative and mediation than we are litigation?
I think that once people know that it exists and this is accessible to them, and know the questions to ask, and that all mediation is not considered equal, there are different styles of it, and that just if someone says, oh yeah, I practice collaborative, if they're not trained in it, I'm sorry, getting off track just a little bit. I think, circling back, that if people know that they can take control of their process and they can find something that best suits them and professionals that best serve them, that collaborative and mediation will grow exponentially. Because when you really think about it, why would someone turn over their life decisions and their family decisions and their financial decisions to someone they don't even know?
Absolutely. Does not make sense.
It does not make sense. And when people internalize that and go, oh, wait, I have choices.
Right. Step back and think about it.
Yeah. Then
these
I
are
think
the
they
most
will
important
continue.
decisions you're going to make, really, in great divorce.
Mm-hmm.
These are the most important decisions you're going to make for the rest of your life. It's going to set you up for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. So I certainly hope it continues to grow, and I just don't see why it wouldn't. Mm-hmm. Divorce is not wonderful. It's not fun. It's very difficult. Like, we can't say, oh, that was rainbows and unicorns, right, everybody. But it can be done better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So let me thank you for being here. It was really a delight to learn more about the collaborative and mediated process, and having a coach and how they can be beneficial to you. I want our listeners to be able to reach out to you. Can you share your website, your social media, and how people may find you?
Absolutely. And I must say, I love what you're doing. Thank you. I so appreciate spending the time with you, and that you are being so thoughtful, helping people make these really important decisions. So my website is Bridging Divorce Solutions. So I can be contacted through that. They can just click and make a little appointment if they want to, or call the office. My Facebook is Bridging Divorce, and I am Brenda Bridges on LinkedIn.
Okay, and you mentioned that you work in other states as a coach. You can work in other states.
As a coach and as a financial. So I've done mediations via Zoom with folks. They don't have to be local. Of course, I love working with people face to face. There's just a different energy about it. But yeah, we can, any way that we can support people in going through this process in a kinder, gentler, more informed way is a wonderful thing. The other thing that I do is if someone contacts me and it's not my scope, you know, I don't want to be out over my skis on helping people when it's not my area of expertise. There are really good networks of other professionals that I can reach out and refer to.
Okay.
So, again,
reach out and ask the questions.
Reach out and ask the questions and know that you're important and you deserve the best support that you can get. And you also don't need to overcomplicate things. If you have a really simple situation, do a simple process. If it's more complicated and you need more support, find the support that you need. There's a lot at stake, or sometimes there's very little. You know, if someone calls me and they've been married for a year and they don't have children and they don't have a house, they don't need me. They probably don't need anyone. Depending on their jurisdiction, they can probably file on their own. There's nothing to fight over in that scenario. If you've been married for 34 years and you have a lot of assets and maybe are close to retirement or already retired, you have a lot at stake. Get good information.
Right. And as you mentioned earlier, you can always ramp up if you find that you need more litigation or whatever. So that's great to know. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to put your contact information in the show notes for our listeners so they can easily find you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Please join me on the next episode of the Silver Divorce Podcast. I also ask you to do me a favor and please follow this show and share it with people you know who are going through divorce. I'd love to hear from you at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com. This podcast is brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. Whether you are considering divorce or maybe you're newly in the divorce process, we'll help you on your journey and tell you things your attorney might not tell you. Until next time, remember, divorce, it's just one event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa, and I'll see you next time.